Hey everyone, welcome to Darkened Echo. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The forest wasn't just dark. It was alive with a silence that pressed against Ethan's ears like a physical weight. At the tree lean, he turned off the car engine, and the world seemed to exhale all at once. No hum of machinery, no streetlights in the distance, just black pine spires stabbing at the cloud-choked sky. The gravel crunched as Marissa shifted in the passenger seat. She hadn't spoken much during the drive, and now she refused to meet his eyes. Her reflection ghosted across the windshield, pale and tight-lipped. "You sure about this?" she asked finally, her voice barely louder than the tick of the cooling engine. "It's the fastest way," Ethan replied, trying to sound certain. His hand tightened on the steering wheel, though he already knew it was damp with sweat. Just half an hour through the trail, then we're at the cabin. Beats 2 hours of back roads. Marissa swallowed hard. "People say this forest isn't right." Ethan forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. "People say a lot of things." But as they stepped out of the car, even he felt it. That heaviness, that pull. The night air was colder than it should have been, carrying the sharp tang of wet soil and pine resin. Beneath it, faint and metallic, was another scent. Rust. Blood. The trail waited, a thin scar of dirt threading between black trees. Ethan flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting a weak tunnel through the dark. The first steps sounded too loud, like boots echoing in a cathedral. The forest swallowed every other noise. No wind, no crickets, not even the far-off hoot of an owl. Marissa walked close, her breath quick. "Why is it so quiet?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't know. The deeper they went, the taller the trees loomed, their branches knitted overhead like the beams of a ceiling. The beam of his flashlight quivered across trunks slick with moss, shadows stretching unnaturally long. Then, Marissa grabbed his sleeve. "Wait, stop." He froze. Her eyes were wide, darting left, then right. "Did you hear it?" she whispered. At first, nothing. Then Ethan's stomach turned to ice. Faint, distant, threading through the stillness came a sound. Not animal, not wind. A whisper. "Leave." Ethan swung the flashlight. The beam shook across trees, roots, branches. Nothing. "Probably the wind," he muttered, but his own voice trembled. Marissa shook her head violently. No, it wasn't." The whisper came again, clearer. Then another joined it, and another. Low, breathy, overlapping. Voices layered until the air seemed full of them. Too many to count. "Turn back. Go home. Leave." The flashlight flickered. Ethan smacked it with his palm. The light steadied, but in that split second of darkness, he thought he'd seen movement. A shape. Marissa clutched his arm so tightly it hurt. "Ethan, look." The beam of light swung forward, and there, between the trees, stood a figure. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood, pale against the void, its face hidden in shadow. Ethan's throat closed. His instinct screamed to run, but his feet wouldn't obey. The voices swelled, overlapping until the forest itself seemed to chant at them, pressing into their skulls. "You shouldn't be here. Turn back. Too late." Marissa tugged his sleeve desperately. Please, let's go back to the car." But the way back was gone. The trail behind them had thickened with shadows, trees seeming closer, thicker, as if the forest had shifted while they weren't looking. Ethan realized something in that moment. Something worse than the whispers, worse than the figure watching them. The forest didn't want them to leave, and the path they'd taken wasn't a path anymore. It was a mouth, and they were already inside. They stood frozen on the narrow trail, hearts pounding, the beam of Ethan's flashlight shaking in his trembling hand. The pale figure between the trees hadn't moved. Not a single twitch of a finger, not the slightest tilt of its head. And yet, every second it remained there, the pressure in the air seemed to grow heavier, pressing on their lungs, making each breath harder to take. "Ethan," Marissa whispered, her voice quivering. "It's watching us." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat was locked, his body stiff. Something in him screamed to run, but something deeper, a colder instinct, warned him not to. The whispers hadn't stopped. They wrapped around them like a coil, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, echoing through the forest from every direction. "Don't look at it. Don't move. You don't belong here." Marissa clutched his sleeve, tugging him backward. "Please, please, let's go." Ethan finally tore his eyes from the figure to glance at the path behind them. His stomach dropped. The trail they'd entered on was no longer there. The trees looked different, thicker, closer, unfamiliar. It was as if the forest had shifted around them, rearranging itself like a maze. "We can't," he murmured. His words barely made it past his lips. "The way back, it's gone." Marissa's eyes filled with tears. No, no. This isn't real. It can't just... Trees can't just move." But Ethan knew what he had seen. The forest wasn't normal. It wasn't just trees and soil. It was something alive, intelligent, and it was playing with them. The pale figure twitched. Just once. A sudden, sharp jerk of its head. Ethan flinched, the flashlight beam jerking wildly. "Did you see that?" Marissa gasped, stepping closer to him. The figure was closer now, only by a few feet, but Ethan swore it hadn't moved. One moment it was further back, half shrouded in mist. The next, it stood nearer, details emerging. A thin body draped in tattered cloth, skin so pale it almost glowed, and eyes that reflected the light like wet glass. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It simply was. The voices surged, overlapping until the forest seemed to shout, "Run, run now, before it's too late." Marissa sobbed, gripping Ethan's arm so tightly her nails dug into his skin. "We have to do something." Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. His instincts warred inside him. Flight or fight, but both seemed impossible. The forest didn't want them to leave, and the thing in the trees wasn't letting them stay. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered again, sputtering like a dying candle. The pale figure blurred in the dark, and in that brief stutter of light, Ethan saw more shapes. Dozens of pale outlines standing deeper in the forest, between the trees, silent and waiting. The light steadied again, and they were gone. Only the one figure remained. Marissa shook her head violently. "Ethan, please. Please, I don't want to die here." Ethan swallowed, forcing down the ice in his chest. He grabbed her hand. "We keep moving. Forward. Don't look at it. Don't listen. Just move." They stepped forward, one shaky foot at a time. The pale figure didn't follow, but as they passed it, Ethan swore he heard something, just for him. A whisper, colder than breath. "You're already mine." His blood ran cold, and though he didn't look back, he felt the weight of dozens of unseen eyes tracking their every step deeper into the forest. The forest swallowed them whole. Each step forward sank deeper into silence, as though the world behind them no longer existed. The beam of Ethan's flashlight swung in a trembling arc, its circle of light barely carving a path through the suffocating dark. Marissa gripped his arm like a lifeline. Her breathing was ragged, shallow, as though she was afraid the trees themselves would hear her if she exhaled too loudly. For a while, there was nothing but their footsteps crunching over the damp trail. Then, without warning, another sound threaded between them. Footsteps. Ethan froze. The hair on his arms lifted. The sound had come from behind, slow, deliberate, heavy on the earth. Marissa's head snapped back, her eyes wide with terror. "Ethan," she hissed, "someone's following us." He turned the flashlight over his shoulder, the beam shaking violently. The trail was empty, nothing but dark pines and thick brambles pressing in like walls. But the sound came again. Crunch. A second pair of footsteps, perfectly out of sync with theirs. Crunch. Marissa clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. Ethan swung the light across the trees, his throat dry. "Hello," he called, though every nerve in his body screamed at him not to. "Who's there?" The forest answered only with silence. And then, crunch. The footsteps started again. Only this time, they weren't behind them. They were beside them. Ethan jerked the flashlight to his left. For a split second, he thought he saw movement, a blur of pale limbs weaving between the trees. But as the beam landed, There was nothing. Just trunks and shadows. Marissa clutched his hand so tightly his fingers burned. Please, stop. Stop calling out. Just keep walking. Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. They moved faster, their steps uneven and clumsy on the narrow trail. But no matter how quickly they went, the sound stayed with them. Footsteps, pacing them, matching their rhythm, sometimes behind, sometimes to the side, sometimes. Ethan realized with horror, just ahead, the whispers returned, curling through the trees like smoke, low and urgent. Closer, closer now. They're waiting, Marissa whimpered, pressing herself closer to him. What do they want from us? Ethan didn't answer, because he feared he already knew. The forest wasn't lost. It wasn't confusing. It was guiding them. Every whisper, every phantom step was hurting them deeper, like prey being funneled into a trap. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered, dimming for half a heartbeat. In that instant of darkness, Ethan's stomach lurched. He had seen something. He was certain of it. A pale face, inches from his own, peering through the black. Hollow eyes, no lids, no breath. When the light steadied, nothing was there. But Marissa's scream tore the silence apart. Ethan, ahead. His beam swung forward, and he saw it. The trail split into two paths. The left was narrow and overgrown, the right wider but darker, the trees leaning and unnaturally, their branches curled like claws. The whispers swelled. This way. No, this way. Follow, follow. The voices overlapped until Ethan couldn't tell which path they wanted him to take. Only that whichever one he chose, the forest would be waiting. He turned to Marissa, his chest heaving. Which way? Her eyes shimmered with tears. There's no safe way. Behind them, the footsteps came again. Louder. Closer. Crunch. Crunch. Something was coming, and they had seconds to choose which path would kill them slower. Ethan's grip on the flashlight was so tight his knuckles had gone white. The beam trembled across the fork, left and right again, as if the light itself was uncertain where it wanted to go. The whispers tangled inside his ears, some calling them left, others pulling them right. The voices were urgent now, overlapping in a fevered chant. This way. No, here. Closer, closer. Marissa's nails dug into his arm. Choose, Ethan. We can't stand here. Behind them, the crunching footsteps had grown heavier, faster. No more stalking, no more pacing. Whatever it was closing in. Ethan's instinct screamed. The left trail was tight, thorny, choked with undergrowth, but it felt human, natural. The right was wider, almost inviting, but wrong in every possible way. Trees bent unnaturally, their trunks curving inward, as if the forest itself was waiting to swallow them whole. He grabbed Marissa's hand and yanked her left. This way. They plunged into the narrow trail, branches slashing across their clothes, roots snagging their feet. The flashlight swung wildly, illuminating only flashes of tangled vines and clawing thorns. For a moment, Ethan thought they'd escaped. The footsteps behind them faded, swallowed by the density of the trees. But then, snap! A branch cracked just behind them. Too loud, too close. Ethan spun the light back and nearly dropped it. A shape moved through the trees. Not walking, not running, crawling. It skittered low to the ground, unnaturally fast, its limbs bending at grotesque angles. The pale glimmer of a face caught the beam, but the features were smeared, shifting, like wet paint sliding off canvas. Marissa screamed and stumbled forward, dragging Ethan with her. Keep running. The trail twisted sharply downward, a slope slick with mud. They slid more than ran, crashing into roots, branches tearing at their arms. The air grew colder, heavy with the stink of damp earth. At the bottom, the path opened into a clearing. Ethan's chest heaved as he raised the light. The trees here were wrong. Their bark looked burned, blackened and charred, but no fire had ever touched them. The branches curled into unnatural shapes, interlocking overhead like the bars of a cage. And in the center of the clearing stood something that froze Ethan's blood. A stone structure, half shrine, half altar, covered in moss and dried vines. Around it, strange markings have been carved into the earth, spiraling outward like a ritual circle. Marissa shook her head violently. No, no, we can't be here. Ethan, we have to go back. But as she turned, they both saw it. The trail behind them had vanished. Where there had once been a slope leading upward, now there was only a wall of trees, thick and seamless, as though the forest had closed its mouth around them. The whispers roared now, all around them, deafening. Welcome. You chose well. You chose wrong. The air shifted. Shadows peeled themselves from the trees, tall and thin, faces hollow, bodies bending like smoke. Their feet never touched the ground. Marissa clutched Ethan's arm, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. It's a trap, she whispered. We didn't escape them. We walked right into them. Ethan raised the flashlight, but the beam flickered, dimming as the shadows closed in. And for the first time, he realized the forest had never given them a choice at all. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps. He aimed the failing flashlight at the stone shrine, but the beam only seemed to make the shadows dance harder, stretching long fingers toward him and Marissa. The whispers were louder than ever, overlapping into a wall of sound that drilled into their skulls. Some voices were familiar, carrying Ethan's tone, Marissa's pleas. Others were alien, deep, gurgling, inhuman. Kneel, offer, you belong here. Marissa staggered backward, pressing her hands over her ears. Make it stop. Ethan, make it stop. But Ethan couldn't. His knees buckled as the air grew thick and heavy, every breath like swallowing damp earth. The shadows closed in, circling them, not attacking but waiting. The altar pulsed. For a second, Ethan thought it was just his eyes, but no. The stone actually shifted, almost breathing. Moss peeled away, vines slithered like snakes across its surface, rearranging themselves. And then he saw it, a hollow depression carved into the center, a place meant to hold something. Marissa followed his gaze and went pale. It once, she whispered, an offering. The shadows swayed in agreement, their hollow faces tilting toward her. No, Ethan hissed. He grabbed her hand. We're not giving it anything. We're leaving. But the forest disagreed. The trees behind them groaned, twisting closer together. Roots erupted from the ground, curling across the clearing like snakes, blocking every escape. The altar's hollow deepened, the stone splitting wider as if it were hungry. Ethan's flashlight sputtered, then died. Darkness swallowed them whole, and in that blackness, they heard something new. Not whispers, not echoes, but screams. Hundreds of them. Men, women, children, all trapped, all crying for help, their voices woven into the chorus of the forest. Marissa clung to Ethan, her body shaking uncontrollably. We can't give it anything, she sobbed. If we do, it'll never let us go. But as she spoke, Ethan felt a tug at his arm. Not from Marissa, from the shadows. One long, spindly hand stretched out of the dark, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. He yanked free, heart hammering, but more hands reached for them, pulling, pushing, not to kill, not to drag them under, but to force them closer to the altar. Marissa screamed, thrashing against the unseen grips. Why us? Why are you doing this to us? The whispers answered in perfect unison. Because you entered, because you stayed, because now you are part of us. The altar groaned, the hollow glowing faintly with a sickly green light, like embers buried beneath ash. Ethan's mind raced. If they didn't give it what it wanted, whatever it wanted, they might never leave this clearing alive. But deep down, a darker thought wormed its way into his head. What if the altar didn't want an object? What if the offering it demanded was one of them? The altar's green glow flickered like a heartbeat, throbbing brighter with every passing second. The whispers had stopped being random now. They moved together, aligned, chanting a single word over and over. Choose, choose, choose. Ethan and Marissa pressed their backs together, spinning in frantic circles as the shadow figures advanced. Dozens of them now, their hollow faces rippling like water, their long limbs swaying in eerie unison. Marissa's nails dug into Ethan's arm. "It's us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It wants one of us." Ethan shook his head violently. No, I won't play its game." But the forest didn't give him a choice. The ground beneath their feet trembled. Roots erupted upward, twisting like serpents, lashing around Ethan's ankles and Marissa's wrists. They were pulled apart, dragged closer to the altar, forced down onto their knees. The hollow in the stone widened further, glowing hotter, a pit of sickly green fire. The air smelled of burning flesh. Marissa screamed, struggling against the roots, her eyes wild with terror. "Ethan, don't let it take me. Please." Ethan thrashed violently, trying to break free, but the shadows pressed their weight down on him. Cold hands clawed his shoulders, his chest, his face. The chanting grew louder, echoing inside his skull until he thought his head would split apart. "Choose, choose, choose." And then came the cruelest trick. The shadows shifted, their hollow faces filled with features. Marissa's face, Ethan's face, dozens of copies. Her voice, his voice, repeating the chant in perfect harmony. "Choose her. Choose him. One must stay. One must give." Ethan's throat burned as he shouted into the night. Take me instead." For a moment, the whispers faltered. The shadows tilted their heads, almost curious. Then Marissa's scream cut through the silence. Her body was being dragged closer, her hair whipping around her face as she fought against the roots. "No, don't you dare. Don't you dare leave me here." Tears blurred Ethan's vision. He pulled with everything he had, veins bulging in his arms, but the roots tightened. The altar's glow seared his skin, pulling them closer, closer. And then, the chanting stopped. The forest grew deathly silent, as if holding its breath. A new voice spoke, deeper than the others, vibrating through the earth itself. "If neither will choose, then the forest will choose for you." The ground split open with a deafening crack. Darkness poured upward, swallowing the altar, swallowing the clearing. Ethan screamed for Marissa, but his voice was ripped away by the roar of the forest itself. The last thing he saw before the dark consumed him was Marissa's face, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream, as the roots dragged them both down. Ethan's eyes snapped open, and for a moment he thought he was dead. There was no forest, no altar, no shadows, only blackness. Thick, suffocating blackness. The air was damp and hot, smelling of rotting wood and soil. He struggled to breathe, chest tight as if buried alive. And then he realized he was beneath something. The roots. Above him, massive tendrils of twisted wood stretched like skeletal ribs, pulsing faintly with that same sickly green glow. They weren't just roots, they were alive, veins of the forest itself, pumping with some unholy rhythm. "Ethan." The voice slithered through the dark, low and familiar. He turned his head and saw her. Marissa. She was pinned against the wall of roots, her wrists and ankles bound, her skin pale in the eerie glow. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and dazed. "Marissa." Ethan crawled toward her, tearing at the vines that held her down. They writhed under his touch, tightening instead of loosening, digging deeper into her skin. She whimpered in pain. "Don't," she whispered weakly. "Don't touch them. It makes them stronger." Ethan pulled his hands back, trembling. "What is this place?" The roots groaned in answer. From deeper within the dark came a sound. Wet, dragging, pulsing. A presence moving closer. And then he saw it. At the center of the cavern, half buried in soil and writhing roots, was a shape so monstrous it made Ethan's stomach turn. It looked like a heart, a massive, blackened heart the size of a boulder, its surface crawling with veins of light. Each beat sent a ripple through the roots, shaking the entire chamber. Marissa's eyes filled with tears. "It's alive," she whispered. "The forest. It has a heart." The whispers returned, echoing around them, but now they were sharper, clearer. "Feed us. Become us. Stay forever." The heart pulsed harder, and Ethan felt his own chest tighten in response. His heartbeat was syncing with it, every thud rattling his bones. He clutched his chest, gasping. Marissa screamed suddenly. The vines around her wrists burrowed deeper, sinking beneath her skin. Dark veins spread across her arm, crawling upward toward her shoulder. "No, let her go." Ethan roared, slamming his fists into the roots, ignoring the way they seared his flesh. The forest shrieked in his head, 1,000 voices at once, furious at his defiance. But his rage only drew its attention. The heart beat once, hard, and the roots lashed out, wrapping around Ethan's throat, lifting him off the ground. His vision blurred, spots dancing before his eyes. Marissa's voice broke through the ringing in his ears. "Ethan, don't give in. Fight it." The whispers grew louder, drilling into his skull. "Choose her. Save yourself. Give her, and you will live. She belongs to us." Ethan clawed at the roots, choking him, his body trembling, lungs screaming for air. He could feel the forest pushing into his mind, planting thoughts that weren't his own. And beneath it all, the truth dawned on him. The forest didn't just want blood. It wanted devotion. It wanted him to willingly give her up, to sacrifice Marissa not by force, but by choice. Because if he chose her, he would never truly escape it. The roots tightened around Ethan's throat until he thought his spine would snap. His vision darkened, his heartbeat syncing with the monstrous pulse of the cavern. The forest wasn't just crushing him, it was pulling him in. Then suddenly light. The roots released him, dropping him hard against the damp ground. But when he opened his eyes, the cavern was gone. He was standing in their house, the dining room, the table set with plates. Marissa smiling at him across the table, her eyes warm, her laugh soft. A moment stolen from before the forest, before the whispers, before everything. "Ethan," she said gently, "you're home. It's over." His chest ached. He wanted to believe it. He wanted to collapse into the chair and let the nightmare fade into memory. But then her laugh stretched too long, too sharp. Her smile cracked, tearing at the edges of her face like splitting porcelain. The house shuddered, and the walls bled shadows. Marissa's voice warped, echoing in dozens of tones. "It can be over, Ethan. All you have to do is give me to it. Just say the words. Offer me." Ethan stumbled back, shaking his head. "No, you're not her." The vision shattered. Now he was outside, in the clearing with the altar. Marissa lay across it, roots stabbing into her chest, her face contorted in agony. Around them stood their future, phantom versions of themselves, older, broken, wandering the forest to shadows. Their voices overlapped into the same chant. One must stay, one must give. Ethan pressed his hands over his ears, screaming, but the visions only grew stronger. Now he was in the forest again, holding Marissa's hand as they ran. But every time he looked at her, her face changed. First her, then the shadow version of her, then nothing but a hollow mask staring back. "No," he roared. "You won't take her from me." The scene flickered like a broken film reel, and suddenly he was back in the cavern. The massive heart loomed before him, glowing brighter now, its rhythm deafening. But something had changed. The roots pinning Marissa were thinner, weaker, as if waiting. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, but she was still alive. The whispers slithered into Ethan's skull, cold and patient. "Say it. Choose. Give her, and the forest will set you free." Ethan's fist trembled. Sweat dripped from his face. He could feel his will cracking under the pressure. His love for Marissa was being twisted into a weapon against him, turned into the very lever the forest needed. Marissa's weak voice cut through the noise. "Don't listen to it. Ethan, please don't." Her words shook him harder than any vision. For the first time, he realized the truth. The forest didn't want his body. It wanted his soul. It wanted his choice. If he gave Marissa up, even in words, he'd be trapped here forever, just another shadow feeding the heart. And yet, if he refused, he might doom them both. The cavern pulsed, louder, brighter, hungrier. The choice was closing in. The cavern throbbed with the rhythm of the monstrous heart. every beat rattling Ethan's bones. The roots around Marissa writhed, pulsing in time with it, feeding on her life. She was pale, her lips trembling as she tried to stay awake. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice little more than breath. "Don't give me up." He dropped to his knees, clawing at the ground, his mind fracturing under the whispers that poured into him. They weren't just words anymore. They were images, memories, twisting into nightmares. Suddenly, the cavern dissolved. Ethan was back in their old bedroom, lying in bed. The storm rattled the windows, and Marissa lay asleep beside him, peaceful. For a moment, he almost believed it, but then he noticed the silence. No rain, no thunder, no breath. He turned, and Marissa's chest wasn't moving. Her skin was gray, her eyes open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Her lips moved soundlessly, whispering words he couldn't hear. Ethan grabbed her, shaking her, screaming, but her body crumbled in his hands, turning to ash. He stumbled back, choking on the smoke, and when he looked up, he wasn't in the bedroom anymore. He was in a hospital. Fluorescent lights hummed above. A heart monitor beeped steadily. Marissa was lying in a hospital bed, hooked to wires and tubes, her body frail. Doctors' voices echoed around him, sharp and cruel. "You couldn't save her. You left her behind. You chose yourself." Ethan's heart thundered. "No, that's not true. I didn't." The beeping stopped. The line went flat. Marissa's eyes snapped open, black and hollow, her mouth stretching unnaturally wide. "You will choose me, Ethan, or I will choose you." The room exploded in darkness. He was back in the cavern, gasping, his whole body shaking with cold sweat. Marissa was still there, bound in roots, barely alive. But now Ethan understood. The forest had shown him his deepest fear, not losing Marissa, but failing her. The guilt of watching her slip away, powerless to save her. That was what it wanted to feed on. That was the chain it meant to wrap around him forever. The whispers coiled tighter in his skull, merciless. "Face it, accept it. You cannot save her. Choose. Ethan staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his torn palms, and glared at the monstrous heart. "No," he growled. His voice was ragged, but steady. "You don't get to decide for me. You don't get to feed on my fear." The cavern shook violently, as if enraged. Roots lashed out, striking the ground around him, trying to pull him back down. But Ethan didn't move. For the first time since entering the forest, he stood tall. His body trembled, but his will was iron. If the forest wanted his soul, it would have to fight for it. The cavern trembled like a living beast, the roots thrashing wildly, as if the forest itself knew Ethan was defying it. The monstrous heart at the center pulsed harder, glowing with a sickly green light that lit every crack and shadow. Marissa screamed as the vines dug deeper into her skin, feeding on her fear. Her face was pale, her lips blue. "Ethan," she cried, her voice breaking. "Don't let it win." Ethan staggered forward, every muscle screaming in protest. His clothes were torn, his hands bloody, but his eyes burned with a desperate fury. The whispers rose in a deafening chorus. "You cannot fight us. She is ours. You belong here." But Ethan ignored them. Step by step, he closed in on the heart. The closer he got, the louder the beat became, until it drowned out his own pulse, until it felt like his ribs were cracking under its rhythm. He pressed his palm against the surface. It was hot, too hot. The skin of the heart burned against him like molten stone, and the veins of light shifted beneath his hand, writhing like living worms. Instantly, visions crashed into him. Marissa's death, his failure, his guilt, 1,000 futures where he lost her, where he wasted away in the forest until nothing of him remained. The forest screamed inside his head. Choose, sacrifice, surrender. But Ethan clenched his jaw and pushed harder. "You don't get to choose for me." The heart thrashed, sending roots lashing at him. One struck his back, another wrapped his leg, another his arm. They pulled him away, tearing his body apart. But he clung to the heart with both hands, his skin blistering. Marissa's voice cut through the chaos. Weak, trembling, but clear. "Ethan, You're stronger than it. Don't let it break you. And that was enough. Ethan drew in one last, ragged breath, and with every ounce of strength left in him, he roared and drove his hand through the surface of the heart. It split open with a deafening crack. Green light exploded outward, flooding the cavern in a blinding storm. The heart shrieked, a sound so loud it rattled the ground for miles. The shadows screamed with it, writhing, dissolving into ash as the roots tore themselves apart. The altar above shattered. The forest itself convulsed, trees snapping, earth splitting, as if the very land was dying. Ethan collapsed beside Marissa, the roots that bound her crumbling to dust. He gathered her in his arms, holding her as the cavern shook around them. The whispers faded, replaced by silence, and then light. For a moment, Ethan thought they were gone, but when he opened his eyes, he and Marissa were lying in the clearing under the open sky. The twisted trees were gone, reduced to splinters. The air was still, eerily calm. Marissa stirred weakly, her head against his chest. Is it over? Ethan held her tighter, his eyes scanning the forest's edge. The silence was too heavy, too complete. And then, from deep within the woods, came a single sound. A heartbeat. Slow, steady, waiting. Ethan's chest went cold. He knew then, the forest wasn't destroyed, only wounded, and it would wait for the next soul foolish enough to wander into its grasp.